What's up, my bookies? Hello, my bookish friends. Welcome or welcome back. I am Elizabeth. This is Reading Wryly, and today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in March. So this month I technically read 13 books. Well, 13 and a half. I DNF'd one. One I'm not going to tell you about because it's part of a secret TBR. So we're going to talk about 12. Well, we're going to talk about 13. It's confusing. I'll talk about the one that I DNF'd as well, but not the secret one.
Way to complicate things right at the beginning, Elizabeth.
Okay. I didn't have any 1-star books, so that's good. I had 1 2-star book, 1 2.5-star book, no 3-star books, 3 3.5-star books, 3 4-star books, 1 4.5-star, and 3 5-star books. Decently distributed. 3 5-star books is great for 1 month, so I'm happy with that. I read mostly horror, thriller, mystery. I've got 1 nonfiction in here. Must be 12:30. Yep. If you are new to my channel and you are so inclined, I would love it if you would go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I will post all of my other social medias over here in case you're interested in connecting somewhere else as well. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into these books. First, I'm going to talk about the book that I DNF'd this month, and that was, unfortunately, Night Film by Marisha, Pessl. I don't know what to say about this. It just wasn't for me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't finish it. I read this for part of the Backlist readathon, and I told myself going into it that I was going to aggressively DNF, and I wasn't liking this at like the 100-page mark, but then I continued to read it for another 230 pages. I read 350 pages almost of this just about 600-page book before I finally decided to give it up. DNFing is really hard for me. It's a struggle. I still, in the back of my mind, am wondering if I would have loved it if I had finished it, but I can't do that to myself. I have to DNF, and I have to let it go out of a sense of self-care. This story is following this family, the patriarch of which is a noir film director who has this cult following. There is an investigator who, in the past, they had kind of hard feelings back and forth, and his career ended up being ruined. Current day, this director's daughter has been found dead at the bottom of an elevator shaft, and so this investigator is investigating the death of his daughter, but also the film director himself, to see what kind of dirt he can find. This is very much multimedia. There's a whole lot of pictures, websites, URLs, things like that, kind of text exchanges and stuff like that throughout here. Initially, when I picked it up on headphones, I didn't understand it. I was completely out of context. I was like, why is this like this? Then I realized all of the things that I was missing, so I picked up the book. Luckily, I had it, and started making a little bit more sense. But even so, most of what I read was from the perspective of this investigator who I didn't particularly like. I didn't particularly think he was that interesting. I don't think the writing style is for me. It's kind of one note, kind of felt like it was monotone. And it didn't help that the audiobook narrator also had this monotone, droll tone to his voice. So, you know, that could have played a part in my dislike of this. But ultimately, I decided I just was not interested, and so I put it down. Let's go to my 2-star book that I did finish. However, I didn't really want to. I did. And that is Razorblade Tears by C.S. Cosby. I'm already gonna hold my copy of this book. How do I say this nicely? Despite my 2-star rating, I don't think this is a bad book. I just think that I was not the right audience for this. And I feel like that is a train of thought that a lot of people who read this follow. It seems like there's 2 camps on this book, and people either love this or they just didn't think it was for them. I really haven't heard anyone say that this is a bad book, but it definitely wasn't for me. I feel like I would recommend this to like my mom or my dad. I do feel like the message that this book is trying to get across, that it's trying to portray, is something that most millennials and certainly Gen Z already understand this and have this lesson learned. Like, this is kind of the movement of our generations. It's basically like, don't judge people based on their race, their sexuality. It's kind of has this sense of equality for all vibe to this book. And unfortunately, I feel like the people that need to hear this are the ones who are not going to be interested in picking up this kind of story. So, you know, that is unfortunate. I didn't dislike the prose. I thought at times there were some really good metaphors, some really good simile in there that I appreciated. But just the perspective of these two main characters, these two dads, I didn't connect to, and so the entire rest of the story I felt kind of disconnected from it, and I didn't get involved in it emotionally. What the story's about is we're following these two dads. One is black, one is white. They each have a son who were in a relationship together and were killed. And at the beginning of the story, we find out that the sons have died. The police kind of give up on the investigation, and so these two dads team up together to figure out what happened and get their revenge. And along the way, they learn a lot about, it's the journey. They learn a lot about each other. They see their own biases. They regret that they hadn't shown their sons the kind of love that they had deserved before they died because they were homophobic. That's the general gist. There are a lot of action scenes in here, and I felt like for some reason there was some kind of disconnect with me in the action scenes. There was all of this brutality happening, but it didn't register for some reason. Even though this by definition was dark, for me, it just didn't hit me. It didn't strike me. I don't know if it was because I didn't connect to the characters or if it was just kind of glazing over these brutal scenes and I wanted it to go into more depth and more detail and more gore. I don't know, but I do feel like this kind of book would be better served from watching it as opposed to reading it. Kayla from Books and Lala mentioned that it would be nice if we had a perspective from the sons before they died. If they had gone into a second timeline to go back in time so we could connect with the sons, I think that would have made this book a lot more accessible to more people. So I completely agree with that. So let's move on to the next book. I have one 2.5-star read, and that was The Hypnotist by Lars Keplar. And I felt a lot of the same feelings for this book as I did for Razorblade Tears. I have learned since that this is a husband and wife duo. I do believe this is a translated work, so I don't know if some things that got lost in translation, but it felt like a guy's book. This is a crime thriller. We're following a lead detective and we're following a hypnotist, or this man, Dr. Eric, I'm trying to remember the details, who did a lot of research into hypnotism as a form of therapy and group hypnotism, etc. When this book opened up, it did have some really dark scenes. I liked that. It was intense at the beginning, but I felt like the tone wavered throughout. And I also like the fact that we're following these two men, like it just felt very guys kind of book to me. I didn't connect with either of the protagonists in the way that I think the author intended me to. And the fact that it's called The Hypnotist, I really wanted it to be about hypnotism more. Of course, it's about hypnotism because there's a crime that happens that's associated with this group of people that are being hypnotized and with this doctor. And then we have this investigator who's exploring what happened. His family is connected as well. There's a lot going on. And so we did get a little bit of insight into that like hypnotism aspect and group therapy, but I wanted it to be more analytical. The whole conflict with this doctor is that his career is on the line because something goes wrong in this hypnotism. His funding for his research gets pulled, his name gets like thrown in the dirt, and it's all because things didn't go as they expected. But I feel like if you're going to give money to a researcher to research hypnotism, like this is subjective. Your success or your failure is not something concrete that you can measure. So when it doesn't go the way you expect it to, for them to react the way they did and just like pull all of the funding and shun him, it didn't make any sense to me. Because if you're gonna put money into something like that, you know you can't expect concrete results. So that whole premise kind of bothered me a little bit, and I just felt like this book was way too long, like way too long. I also considered DNFing this and didn't, and probably should have. I have heard that the farther you go into the series, it gets darker, it gets better. I don't know at this point that I am invested in continuing in this series, so I'll leave it at that. I want to talk about the books that I liked. I don't like talking about books I didn't like. This sucks. Okay, so I didn't have any 3-star books. Let's move on to 3.5-star books. And the first one I'll start with is The Institute by Stephen King. I did read this as well for part of the Backlist readathon. If you want to see part of my experience, I will link my second vlog for that up here, in which I started reading this and did not finish. Been reading a lot of Stephen King lately. It's weird, but I'm kind of just exploring Stephen King, seeing what I like, what I don't like. I do have another book of his in this wrap up that I enjoyed more, so hang around if you want to get to that. But for this one, I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought it was fine. It really reminded me of The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. And I don't know if it's supposed to be the other way around. A lot of people say Chuck Wendig remind them of Stephen King, but I read that one first. So for me, it's the other way around. Anyway. We have some really cool ideas, some really cool themes happening here, but it just felt dragged out, it felt long, it felt a bit tedious, and it didn't hit where I wanted it to hit. While I don't think this is a bad book, and I certainly would recommend it, I just don't think it's necessarily what I was looking for going into it. So in the Institute, we're following two different perspectives that eventually do come together. We're following Tim, who was a police officer and had some trouble, got fired, and is now trying to just like start over and live kind of a quiet life in this small town. And so he applies to be the night knocker, which was never described in the book what it actually is. But from what I gather, a night knocker is kind of like a police officer, but they don't carry a gun and they kind of just patrol at night and, you know, keep their eyes open for anything weird that's going on. So at the beginning of the book, we're introduced to him, and then it just kind of switches perspectives to the perspective of this kid, Luke, who's 12 years old. His parents are having a meeting with his principal at his school, and he's an absolute genius. He has a didactic memory. The principal is explaining to them, we have nothing else to teach him. He is beyond us. We need to start thinking about college for him, all of this. He also has some telekinetic powers. And so he ends up getting kidnapped. This is all at the beginning of the book, so it's not a spoiler. He gets kidnapped and brought to the institution. The institution is a place where they collect children with special powers. They are either telekinetic or they are telepathic, and they are doing experiments on these children. They are telling them that they are here for this grander purpose, and that after they finish their purpose, they will erase their memories and they will continue their lives as it always was. They won't even remember this. The kids start to realize that there's more happening at this institute than they initially thought. Okay, so that's the general gist of this book, without giving spoilers. See how, like, even just explaining what the book is, I have to just be so wordy with it because there's just so much going on. Generally, I really liked Luke as a character. I thought he was sweet, and I loved that he was so smart, how he kind of took on this leadership role within this group of kids. I felt like I was more focused on the Institute than it was on the powers, and I wanted to be focused on the powers. I wanted to see what these kids could do. I wanted it to be like Heroes, the TV show. They're hiding these powers and they almost get caught and they have to save people by using their powers secretly, and like that kind of thing. Did not happen. It wasn't like a superhero thing in the least. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up about it. Thought it was fine. I thought it was too long, but I liked the idea and the concept. Moving on. My next 3.5-star book is Confessions by Kanae Minato. I have heard such good things about this book. It was really short, it was really quick, and this is also kind of a story of revenge. And I liked it on a deeper level. I respect it and I appreciated it more than I actually enjoyed my reading experience of it. It's a Japanese thriller and a story of revenge about this woman. We have all these kids in class and they're gathered on like the last day of school, and she's explaining to them why she's not coming back next year. During that school year, her daughter had died in this freak accident. So they kind of understand, but at the same time, as she continues talking, she's telling them about how, in fact, her daughter was murdered, and she is going to fully explain the culpability of the students in her class. So we go on to figure out who is actually responsible for her daughter's death, why, and all of the implications of that in those kids' lives throughout the next year or so. So we get different perspectives from the kids. You know, I thought it was intriguing. I thought it was a good concept. Again, I didn't connect to the writing style, and I don't know if that's because it's translated or what. I just didn't love it, and I honestly don't remember that much about it. So it's like hard for me to even explain to you why I didn't love it, and I wish I could do a better job of that, but I just don't know. So I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. Next, 3.5-star, we have Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I read this for Backlist Readathon as well. This one is just a really, really short little novella, and this is what... Oh geez, fix that later. Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware is based on this story. And after reading it, I see the connection, but this one's very different too. So, God, I just love this cover. I miss Ruth Ware. I can't wait for her new release this year. What is this about? This is about a governess that comes to take care of these two children. How do I even explain this without showing my bias? Because the way this book ends is kind of like open-ended. So it's really cool in that way. If you liked books like Cabin at the End of the World, where you kind of have to decide for yourself what was actually happening here, then you will love this. And if you, well, you might love it. But if you don't like those books, then you will not like this at all. The kids are the most beautiful kids she's ever seen in her life. They're just like gorgeous, almost to the extent of like, are they real? And they seem like almost like sirens, where they're like calling out to her. They can do no wrong. They're just these perfect children. She thinks that they're in danger, and so she's trying to protect them from this supernatural danger. I guess I can leave it at that. But at the end, you don't know what is what. You don't know who is telling the truth, who is lying, if it's an unreliable narrator or not. It's very interesting in that way. I will say the writing style, like, I don't know when this was written, but it's written a long time ago, and that is plain, that is obvious. The writing style is so old-fashioned, and it's daunting, right? For such a short book, this writing style is so daunting. Not only is it just like these drawn-out sentences that are overly descriptive and like have tangents within each sentence, but also it's being told in a way that's almost like Pride and Prejudice, where these people, when they're having conversations, it's all about high society, and we don't say what we actually mean. We say what is polite, and then we imply what we actually mean. So it's very much convoluted on different levels here. But that being said, after I sat with it for a while, I really, really liked the way the story was told, setting aside the difficulty understanding the writing. I really, really liked the concept of it, and I think it was smart. I think it's clever, and I think it leaves a lot of room for discussion. So if you have read this and you want to talk about it, I'm more than happy to discuss this. Okay, let's get into my 4-star reads for this month. We're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to the good stuff. We have, first of all, Karin Slaughter's A Faint Cold Fear. This is the third, I believe, book in the Grant County series, crime fiction, and we're following Sarah Linton. I'm not going to get too deep into it. At this point, though, in the series, like, I love these characters. I love Sarah Linton, who's a medical examiner. If you've read Blindsided, that is the first book in this series. I'm going to try to read one of these every month until I'm done with this, and then I'll move on to her other series. But this was another just solid book by Karin Slaughter. She gives me what I expect her to give me. I enjoy it all the way through. We have strong female characters. We have this small town in, is it in Georgia? I think it's in Georgia. Like, get the hell out of this town if you live in this town, because things keep happening here, and to Sarah and the people that she loves. Like, get out of this town. It's like, oh, I just spit on myself. It's like one of those situations where you're like, dude, for such a small town, there are a lot of brutal people that live here. But setting that aside, setting aside my disbelief here in this just overall situation, the way she writes is so awesome. I love her characters. And I'm in love with all of these characters. She has a connection to her ex-husband, who is the like lead detective, lead investigator in this small town. She's a medical examiner as well as a doctor in the town. And then we're following also Lena, who works with her husband Jeffrey, some people in her family as well. This one starts off with a body that they find in the woods. When they get to the woods to investigate it, another crime occurs. It's connected to the local college. They don't know if some people in their immediate surroundings are involved, but it's also hitting Sarah very close to home in this one because one of her family members is caught up in this and they don't want to be. I'll leave it at that, but I give it 4 stars. As I continue on with this series, I'm not shocked anymore by this writing. I just like, it's almost like a comfort read. So nothing about this absolutely stands out for me, which is why I didn't give it 5 stars, but it's still like that really good, just like comfort reading. I can rely on it. This is Old Faithful. Like, Karin Slaughter is just giving me what I want from crime fiction. So that's it. I do recommend the series, so if you want to, Blindsided, again, is the first one. You want to start there. Let's continue on with this trend. I read Postmortem for Beth's book club this month for Beth's All Booked. This one, actually, it's like, this is like the Patricia Cornwell and Karin Slaughter, I feel like, are, what's the word when you're like in the same field at the same time? Contemporaries? I mean, obviously this book was written more recently. This book was written in like 1990. So there's a lot of discrepancies happening between what's up to date, what's not up to date, and things that are being said and talked about that aren't necessarily kosher anymore. I don't even know if it's kosher for me to say kosher. Wow, what a mess I'm doing at describing this. This is a crime fiction book by Patricia Cornwell written in 1990, I believe. We're following Kay Scarpetta, who is also a forensic medical examiner. She's also getting caught up in these crimes that are happening in her town in Virginia. There are a lot of things in this book that are not okay today. There's a discussion surrounding AIDS that is very biased. There is a discussion surrounding trans people that is very biased, and words that are being used that are not okay anymore. But if you put that aside, take it for what it is in the context from when it was written. This is a really good crime book. Also outdated is the forensics and the technology, obviously. But there's a lot of talk about profiling here that's really cool, absolutely accurate. Like, she knows what she's talking about when it comes down to profiling. If you're a true crime fan and you like those kinds of deep discussions, then this will be for you. This book is similar to Karin Slaughter's crime fictions, although I think Sarah Linton is cooler, like as a character. She's more hip. She's like this really tall redhead, and maybe that's why I like her too. But she's also sassier, while Kay is sassy in her own way, but she's more sure of herself. She is more cerebral. This book was more science heavy than any of Karin Slaughter's books. So if that's what you like about it in the forensics aspect, even though this was outdated in that regard, I think you would like this, and you would never guess the killer. But I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was fun, and I like Kay Scarpetta. I wish this was updated. I wish there was like a new version of this. I'll have to see if Patricia Cornwell has any recent books. I don't know that she does. She might be retired at this point, and I don't blame her if she is. But overall, I thought this was a pretty good book. I just kind of had to remove myself from the fact that this was written, 30 odd years ago. So there's that. My next 4-star book, we have The Sun Down Motel by Simone St. James. I have another one of her books in this wrap up that I will be talking about in a little bit. But as far as this one goes, I thought this was a solid 4-star book. I enjoyed it. I have fun with it all the way through. This is a dual timeline paranormal thriller. You have Viv in the 1980s in Fell, New York. She works at the Sun Down Motel. There are girls around town going missing, and she is investigating that when she herself goes missing. Present day, or 2017 I think it was, we have Carly, who is Viv's niece. She never got to meet her aunt, but she's always had this kind of lore in her family about her aunt's disappearance. And there's some stuff going on in her personal life she kind of wants to escape from. So she decides to move to Fell, New York, start working at the Sun Down Motel, and investigate the disappearance of her aunt. And in doing so, she discovers all of these other mysteries that are surrounding this hotel, surrounding this town. There's some generational things going on in there that carry on through both of the timelines. The hotel itself is just really creepy and eerie. There's doors that open and shut on their own. There are apparitions that appear. Meanwhile, she's meeting people. She's kind of integrating into the community, and she's getting hints and tidbits of little information. She refuses to give up until she finds answers. And the way this all comes together at the end, I thought was very well done. I did enjoy the twist. Yeah, and I was kind of wavering for a while if should this be 3.5 stars or should this be 4 stars? Because I know a lot of time like a 4-star for me, like I want to be excited about it but still have some complaints about it. This one, it's not as exciting to me for some reason. Like, I think maybe it was a little YA for me. I think Carly, I think she's like 19 or 20, so technically I think it would be like new adult. Just the overall themes of this I didn't connect with as much as I did her Simone St. James's other book that I'm going to talk about, but I just can't deny the solidity, the solidness. Just overall, this is just very well done. It's written well. The story is good. The characters are good. The themes are good. Like, I just thought it was good. So I can't move it to 3.5 star because I think it's better than that. So yeah, Sun Down Motel. Let's move on to my 5-star books. Mind My Haggard Appearance. I completely skipped over one of my books, my only 4.5 star. And so I'm going to tell you about that now. and that is 7 Days by Alex Lake. This one was so good. I can't believe I forgot to tell you guys about it. I can't remember who mentioned this on Instagram. Somebody read it and was like, oh my god, this book was so good. I looked it up. I got it right then. I read it in one day. I gave it 4.5 stars, as I said. I haven't read Room, but it reminded me of that, where we have this abduction of this woman. She has a child. She's kept in this room for so many years. So we're following Maggie. There's a dual timeline. This one isn't about the twists and the turns. You kind of know what's going to happen. Well, in a sense, you do. Maggie's been locked up in this room for years. It's her son's 3rd birthday in 7 days, hence the title of this book. She knows that he's going to take her son away in 7 days because she had 2 sons before him who he took away on their 3rd birthday. She doesn't know what happened to them, nothing, but this is the 3rd time and she knows it's going to happen. So she is preparing in those 7 days to figure out what she's got to do to save her son. Meanwhile, we're getting flashbacks from when she was abducted when she was 16 years old. And then we also follow her family in present day, how they're moving on, how they're dealing with the loss of Maggie. We also get a perspective from the detective who's on the case, who's kind of obsessed with the one that got away because they never solved the case. They never found her. They never convicted anyone. And so all of this kind of going down, the tension is so high and you just fall in love with Maggie and her little boy and you just have such high hopes for them. And it was just so fast, so fast paced. It was so enthralling and I had a blast with it. So 4.5 stars, highly recommend this one. And I will send you back over to my previous self. Let's move on to my 5-star books. Yay! 5-star books. I have 3 of them. The first one I want to talk about is In the Tall Grass by Stephen King. Okay, so this one is a short story. It's actually by Stephen King and Joe Hill, his son. This one I was really surprised by. I think Stephen King's shorter fiction is probably something that's going to sit better with me in the future because you get those great ideas and those great themes, but also like we don't have to sit through this like long, drawn out thing. I don't want to give you too much information about this because it is so short, but basically we have this small town in the middle of nowhere, this field of really tall grass, and this family, brother and sister, are just like passing through this town. They happen to stop and then they hear this young boy calling through the grass saying, "I can't find my mom." They hear his mom as well. They're trying to find each other. So they say, okay, we'll come, we'll help. So they go into this grass. And then once they enter the grass, there is something weird that's happening that just like does not sit right. They lose each other and then they can't find each other. So we have all these people in this grass, nobody can find each other. They're doing tests. They're hopping up out of the grass to see each other. They can hear each other's voices getting closer, but then when they hop up, they're actually like way across the field. And they're like, this doesn't make any sense at all. There are really weird things that happen in this grass. There's almost like this culty kind of situation where I don't know if it's culty or if it's like supernatural. It almost gives me like Midsummer vibes. There's a couple of scenes that are just really, really dark and really disgusting. I thought it was fun. I've actually seen the adaptation of this, which I didn't realize until I started reading the book, and I was like,
this is familiar. I remember seeing a movie about grass.
And I don't know if having seen that beforehand helped me because I knew what was coming, or if it was just that it was more succinct, more to the point, but I really enjoyed this. I definitely recommend it for like just a short, quick horror if you're looking for something to read for a readathon or just some quick dark horror. I think this is a really, really good option for you. Okay, let's move on. The next book I have to talk about is 18 Tiny Deaths by Bruce Goldfarb. This is the untold story of Francis Glessner Lee and the invention of modern forensics. This is my nonfiction book that I read for the Backlist readathon as well, and my current obsession. If you haven't heard me talk about Francis Glessner Lee yet, then you're new to my channel. Because I am obsessed with her and I think she was just like the most badass queen. She was a debutante born in late 1800s Chicago. She kind of defied all expectations for women at the time. She had enough money, she could have gone to college, she could have gone to school, but women just weren't doing that at that time. She got married, she had kids, but she was bored. Her whole life she was interested in crime and truth. So she ended up playing a huge role in modern forensics today, what we call modern forensics, what back then was referred to as legal medicine. She donated a bunch of money to Harvard to start a program of legal medicine. She was deeply involved within that. She curated the library for Harvard, and all along the way, she never wanted any attention for anything she'd done. She was taken advantage of, but she still pushed on because she wanted there to be some kind of legal system where we could determine what is truth and what is not, what is crime and what is not. She also made these tiny dioramas of crime scenes, meticulously to scale, just like these beautiful representations, I'll pop some up here, of these crime scenes for the purpose of helping police officers to hone their skills at walking into a death investigation, to kind of keep an open mind, take in all of the details, and determine what type of death this is. Of course, as just a part of the investigation, of course, then it would go to the medical examiner and that side of it too. Like, you have no idea how little regulation there was with medical examiners, coroners back in the day. Like, it was kind of an appointed position and anyone could be a coroner, and then they could just come in and say, nope, this death was accidental, as they like take the knife and like keep it behind their back.
No, that was an accident, sir.
But they're a coroner, so they can get away with it. So it became this like corrupt thing, and she wanted to put a stop to this. Anyway, she lived this really long and hard life. She's the like cornerstone of modern forensics in our society, and nobody knows who she is. Nobody acknowledges how amazing she is, except for Bruce Goldfarb. But this isn't just about her. Like, you think it's going to be a biography about her, but it's also about all of the other events in her lifetime and things that happened around her that may have changed her perception, that may have guided her towards the place that she ended up at. She is the star of the show. She's the star of this book, but it's not just about her, and I thought that was really cool too. Yeah, I'm gonna stop droning on about this, but I absolutely highly recommend this book if you're interested at all. I also have another video where we looked at her tiny dioramas to see if we could figure out the clues, and I'll link that up here as well if you're interested. All right, and my last book that I'm going to talk about this month is the book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. This is her newest release. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely loved this. I thought it was so good that I actually read this before the Sun Down Motel and was just blown away. I thought it was so amazing. There's so many different aspects of this. Again, we have a dual timeline. In the current timeline, we're following Shea, who is a crime blogger, and who also had some stuff happen in her past which piqued her interest in crime and true crime and things of that nature. So she's a little bit traumatized. She's gone through some things. She's working at a bank and she runs into Beth, who is this notorious woman who in the 1970s went to jail for being a serial killer, basically. But she was never convicted. She ended up getting off the hook, but all of this time, nobody knows, did she do it, didn't she do it? Beth agrees to let Shea interview her. And so for this whole book, it's got this very much interview style formatting a la Evelyn Hugo, which I absolutely am finding that I love this style. I compared this to if Colleen Hoover had written Evelyn Hugo, because it's written in a way that just sucks you in from the very beginning. It really just like catches your attention. And then I read this in one night. I stayed up till 3 a.m. reading this. It sucked me in. I could not let go. I feel like that's something that Colleen Hoover's really good at, but also with that kind of Evelyn Hugo aspect where it's this back and forth. You're learning things as Shea is learning things as Beth is telling her. As Beth is telling her, that's when we're going back into the past timelines and learning how we got to where we are today. I just thought it was really, really well done. There's a lot of talk about psychology and trauma. There's also the supernatural aspect, which I didn't know if I was going to like and ended up loving. It has to make sense for me, for me to buy into the supernatural things, and it tracked. We also have a little bit of a romance subplot, which I enjoy in my thrillers. All around, I just thought this was like everything that I wanted. This was everything I could have asked for. Someone else mentioned this as well, but I had the exact same thought as I was reading it. This is what I wanted from If You Disappear by Eliza Jane Brazier last year, which was my worst book of the year. and it had these same kind of themes, though it was a podcast, not a blogger, but it had this like true crime theme, it had this mystery, all these things that I feel like are catered to me, like perfectly for me, the psychology, the crime, what I wanted from that, I got from this. And so I was really, really happy with that. Yeah, this is probably gonna go on my best of the year this year. I love it. I cannot recommend it enough. I think it's so well done. It felt age appropriate for me. It hit on all the right themes, all the right topics, and it killed, literally and figuratively. All right, that is it for my March wrap up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, y'all. I appreciate you so much. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read this month down in the comments below, and I will see you for my next video. Don't forget that life is short, so read Wryly. Cheers and goodbye.